What happens when the nation's most secure facilities fail to hold its most dangerous inmates? From daring tunnel digs to corrupt guards aiding getaways, these prison escapes shock the U.S. and expose deep cracks in the correctional system. Today, we dive into the most infamous prison breaks in American history, the masterminds behind them, how they pulled it off, and the massive manhunts that followed. Stay tuned. Richard Lee McNair, the man who mailed himself out of prison. State of crime, Louisiana. Age at time of escape, 47. On April 5, 2006, Richard Lee McNair, a convicted murderer serving a life sentence, orchestrated a daring escape from the United States Penitentiary in Pollock, Louisiana. Assigned to the prison's mailroom, McNair spent months devising his plan. He constructed a makeshift escape pod by hiding inside a pallet of mailbags, equipped with a breathing tube to ensure his survival. The pallet was shrink-wrapped and transported by forklift to a warehouse outside the prison's perimeter. Once the area was clear, McNair emerged and walked away to freedom. This was not McNair's first escape. In 1992, he escaped from the North Dakota State Penitentiary by crawling through a ventilation duct, remaining at large for 10 months before being recaptured. Following his 2006 escape, McNair managed to evade authorities for over a year, traveling across the United States and into Canada using various aliases and disguises. Shortly after his 2006 escape, McNair was stopped by police officer Carl Bordelon in Ball, Louisiana. The encounter, captured on the officer's dash cam, shows McNair calmly convincing the officer that he was merely out for a jog, despite matching the description of the escaped inmate. His composed demeanor and quick thinking allowed him to avoid immediate recapture. On October 25, 2007, McNair was finally apprehended in Campbellton, New Brunswick, Canada, after a traffic stop led to a brief foot chase. He was extradited to the United States and placed in the United States Penitentiary, Florence High, a high-security federal prison in Colorado. McNair's escapes highlighted significant security lapses and prompted reviews of prison procedures. Frank Abagnale, Jr., the great imposter's daring prison escape. State of crime, Georgia. Age at time of escape, 23. In 1971, Frank Abagnale, Jr., notorious for his audacious impersonations and frauds, executed a cunning escape from the Federal Detention Center in Atlanta, Georgia. While being transferred into the facility by a U.S. Marshal, an oversight occurred. The Marshal failed to provide the prison with Abagnale's detention commitment papers. This administrative lapse led prison officials to believe that Abagnale was an undercover prison inspector sent by the FBI. Seizing the opportunity, Abagnale used his phone call to contact a friend, John Sebring, instructing her to forge a business card, identifying him as an FBI agent. He also had her pose as his fiancée and deliver the card to the prison, further solidifying his fabricated identity. The ruse was so convincing that the prison staff granted him privileges and eventually released him into Sebring's custody. They even provided him with a government vehicle for transportation, facilitating his escape. Following his escape, Abagnale fled to Montreal, Canada, where he planned to catch a flight to Brazil. However, his plans were thwarted when Canadian authorities, acting on a tip, apprehended him before he could leave the country. He was subsequently handed over to U.S. officials and returned to custody. Abagnale was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison for multiple counts of fraud and escape. He served approximately 5 years before being released on the condition that he would assist the federal government, particularly the FBI, in identifying and apprehending other fraudsters. Abagnale's escape was so seamless and convincing that it wasn't until days later that prison officials realized they had been duped. The incident highlighted significant vulnerabilities in prison protocols, as well as Abagnale's extraordinary skills in deception and manipulation. His ability to exploit bureaucratic oversights and human trust remains one of the most remarkable aspects of his criminal career. James Robert Jones, the Army captain who vanished for decades. State of crime, South Carolina. Age at time of escape, 23.
WTVJ reports the 59-year-old man was convicted for premeditated murder and aggravated assault. He was serving a 23-year prison sentence but escaped from the maximum security prison only a few years after incarceration.
James Robert Jones, a former U.S. Army captain convicted of murder, executed a stunning escape in 1997 from the United States Disciplinary Barracks at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. Jones had been convicted in the brutal stabbing death of a fellow soldier's wife in 1917-4 and was serving a life sentence. However, within just 3 years, he managed to flee the high-security military prison. Using a falsified pass and taking advantage of relaxed supervision within the prison's work detail system, Jones simply walked away from the facility. It was an escape so clean and quiet that authorities didn't realize he was missing until after he was long gone. After his escape, Jones disappeared without a trace for nearly 4 decades. He assumed a new identity, Bruce Walter Keith, and settled in Florida. He lived an apparently normal suburban life, even working for years at a medical equipment company near Fort Lauderdale. Jones paid taxes, maintained a low profile, and kept out of trouble, which allowed him to avoid detection for years. He married, had children, and blended into civilian life with no known connection to his past crimes. His long disappearance made him one of the most elusive escapees in U.S. military history. In 2014, the U.S. Army and the U.S. Marshals Service reopened his case as part of a broader cold case review of military fugitives. Using fingerprint analysis and facial recognition technology, investigators tracked Jones down in Deerfield Beach, Florida. He was arrested without incident, and it was later confirmed that he had been living under an alias since the late 1970s. After his capture, he was returned to military custody and transferred back to the U.S. Disciplinary Barracks in Fort Leavenworth to resume his life sentence. Jones's escape remained undetected for nearly 37 years, making it one of the longest successful fugitive runs in modern military history. The fact that he lived in plain sight for decades, holding a job, paying taxes, and maintaining a seemingly normal life speaks to the ease with which some fugitives can reinvent themselves. The Texas 7, a deadly escape and nationwide manhunt. State of crime, Texas. Age at time of escape. Varied and ringleader George Rivas was 30. On December 13, 2007, inmates orchestrated a meticulously planned escape from the John B. Connally Unit, a maximum security prison near Kennedy, Texas. The group, later dubbed the Texas 7, included George Rivas, Michael Rodriguez, Joseph Garcia, Larry Harper, Donald Newbury, Randy Halprin, and Patrick Murphy. They overpowered civilian maintenance supervisors and prison guards, stealing their clothing, credit cards, and identification. The escapees then used a prison maintenance truck to flee the facility, leaving behind a note signed the Texas 7. Their escape was facilitated by smuggled tools and a detailed understanding of the prison's security protocols. Following their escape, the Texas 7 embarked on a crime spree across Texas. On December 24, 2000, they robbed an Oshman sporting goods store in Irving, Texas, stealing firearms, ammunition, and cash. During the robbery, Irving police officer Aubrey Hawkins responded to a silent alarm. Upon arrival, he was ambushed and shot 11 times by the escapees, who then ran over him with their vehicle as they fled the scene. Officer Hawkins succumbed to his injuries, leaving behind a wife and young son. The escapees evaded capture for over a month, traveling across multiple states. Their run ended in January 2001, following a broadcast of America's Most Wanted that featured their story. Tips from viewers led authorities to a trailer park in Woodland Park, Colorado, where 6 of the 7 were apprehended. Larry Harper committed suicide before he could be captured. The remaining 6 were extradited to Texas, tried and convicted for their crimes. All received death sentences for the murder of Officer Hawkins. The Alcatraz escape, America's most infamous prison break. State of crime, California. Age at time of escape. Frank Morris, 35, John Anglin, 32, Clarence Anglin, 31. On the night of June 11, 1962, 3 inmates, Frank Morris and brothers John and Clarence Anglin, executed a meticulously planned escape from Alcatraz Federal Penitentiary, a maximum security prison located on Alcatraz Island in San Francisco Bay. Utilizing sharpened spoons and an improvised drill made from a vacuum cleaner motor, they widened the ventilation ducts at the back of their cells. To conceal their absence during nightly checks, they crafted dummy heads from plaster, flesh tone paint, and real human hair, placing them in their beds. The trio navigated through the utility corridors, climbed to the roof, and descended to the shoreline, where they assembled a makeshift raft constructed from over 50 raincoats. They launched into the frigid waters of the bay, aiming for the mainland. The escape was discovered the following morning, triggering an extensive manhunt by the FBI, U.S. Marshals, and local authorities. Despite exhaustive efforts, no definitive evidence of the men's fate was found. Debris believed to be from the raft and personal belongings were recovered, but the escapees themselves were never located. The FBI officially closed the case in 1979, concluding that the men likely drowned. However, the U.S. Marshals Service continues to investigate, keeping the case open. In 2013, a letter purportedly from John Anglin surfaced, claiming that all 3 men had survived the escape and lived incognito for decades. The authenticity of the letter remains unverified, but it reignited public interest in the case. Over the years, there have been numerous reported sightings and theories suggesting the men survived, but none have been conclusively proven. The 1962 Alcatraz escape remains one of the most daring and enigmatic prison breaks in American history. It has inspired books, documentaries, and films, most notably the 1979 movie Escape from Alcatraz, starring Clint Eastwood. The escape highlighted vulnerabilities in prison security and led to increased measures in correctional facilities nationwide. Alcatraz itself was closed in 1963, a year after the escape, and has since become a popular tourist destination managed by the National Park Service. The 2015 Clinton Correctional Facility escape. State of crime, New York. Age at time of escape, Richard Matt, 48, David Sweat, 34. On June 6, 2015, inmates Richard Matt and David Sweat executed a meticulously planned escape from the maximum security Clinton Correctional Facility in Dannemora, New York. Both convicted murderers, they used power tools to cut through the steel walls at the back of their adjoining cells, gaining access to the prison's catwalks and utility tunnels. Navigating through a complex network of pipes and tunnels, they eventually emerged from a manhole outside the prison walls. Their escape was facilitated by Joyce Mitchell, a civilian prison employee who provided them with tools and assistance. The inmates left behind decoy dummies in their beds to delay detection. The escape triggered a massive manhunt involving over 1,500 law enforcement officers. After nearly 3 weeks on the run, Richard Matt was located and fatally shot by U.S. Border Patrol agents on June 26, 2015, in a wooded area near Malone, New York. 2 days later, David Sweat was shot and captured by a New York State trooper just 2 miles from the Canadian border. Sweat was hospitalized for his injuries and later returned to prison. The escape was reminiscent of the fictional breakout in The Shawshank Redemption, drawing widespread media attention. Investigations revealed that Joyce Mitchell had developed inappropriate relationships with both inmates and had planned to be their getaway driver, but backed out at the last moment. She was sentenced to up to 7 years in prison for her role in the escape. The 2023 Chester County Prison escape. Danilo Cavalcante's daring breakout. State of crime, Pennsylvania. Age at time of escape, 34. On August 31, 2023, Danilo Cavalcante, a 34-year-old convicted murderer, escaped from Chester County Prison in Pennsylvania. Security footage revealed that Cavalcante employed an unconventional method. He crab walked up a narrow hallway, scaling the walls to reach the roof. From there, he navigated through razor wire and made his way off the prison grounds. This escape was particularly alarming, as it was the second such incident at the facility within a short period, highlighting significant security lapses. Cavalcante's escape initiated a massive manhunt involving local, state, and federal law enforcement agencies. Over the course of 2 weeks, he managed to elude capture, during which time he was spotted multiple times and even managed to steal a van and a .22 caliber rifle. The search concluded on September 13, 2023, when a tactical team located and apprehended him in a wooded area, using thermal imaging technology to aid in the capture. During his time on the run, Cavalcante managed to alter his appearance by shaving his facial hair and acquiring new clothing, making identification more challenging for authorities. His ability to survive in the wild and avoid detection for an extended period drew national attention and raised concerns about prison security protocols. The incident prompted a comprehensive review of security measures at Chester County Prison. Officials implemented immediate changes, including the installation of additional security cameras, increased staffing, and revised protocols for inmate movement. Forrest Tucker, the gentleman bandit and escape artist. State of crime, California. Age at time of escape, 59. In the summer of 1979, Forrest Silva Tucker, a seasoned bank robber and escape artist, orchestrated a daring escape from San Quentin State Prison in California. Along with 2 accomplices, Tucker constructed a makeshift kayak within the prison walls. Utilizing this homemade vessel, they paddled away from the prison, which is situated on the shores of San Francisco Bay, right under the watchful eyes of the guards. This escape was one of Tucker's most audacious, showcasing his ingenuity and determination. Following the escape, Tucker evaded capture for 4 years. During this period, he led a gang known as the Over the Hill Gang, comprising elderly criminals who committed a series of bank robberies across the United States. Their operations were marked by meticulous planning and a non-violent approach, which often involved charming interactions with bank staff. Tucker's ability to blend in and his courteous demeanor made it challenging for authorities to apprehend him. Tucker claimed to have escaped from prison successfully 18 times and unsuccessfully 12 times, earning him a reputation as one of America's most prolific escape artists. His life and escapades were so captivating that they inspired the 2018 film The Old Man and the Gun, starring Robert Redford. The movie portrays Tucker's final years, during which he continued his criminal activities well into his late 70s, embodying a blend of charm and audacity that defined his criminal career. Forrest Tucker's life story shows just how paradoxical people can be, blending crime, charm, and a relentless drive to reinvent himself at every turn. Despite numerous incarcerations, he remained undeterred, continually seeking freedom and engaging in criminal enterprises. His exploits have been documented in various articles and books, offering insights into the mind of a man who defied the odds and the law repeatedly. Tucker passed away in 2004 while serving a 13-year sentence at the Federal Medical Center in Fort Worth, Texas, leaving behind a legacy that continues to intrigue and perplex. Casey White prison escape. State of crime, Alabama. Age at time of escape, 38 years old. The 2022 escape of Casey White from an Alabama jail, aided by corrections officer Vicky White, captivated the nation with its blend of romance, betrayal, and tragedy. On April 29, 2022, Vicky, then the Assistant Director of Corrections at Lauderdale County Jail, escorted Casey, a 38-year-old inmate awaiting trial for capital murder, out of the facility under the pretense of a mental health evaluation. This act marked the beginning of an 11-day manhunt that ended with Vicky's death and Casey's recapture. Investigations revealed that Vicky and Casey had developed a romantic relationship during his incarceration. Prior to the escape, Vicky sold her home at a loss, purchased firearms, and acquired a getaway vehicle. Their plan involved multiple vehicles in a series of motels as they fled northward. On May 9, 2022, authorities located the pair in Evansville, Indiana. A brief car chase ensued, culminating in a crash. As law enforcement approached, Vicky shot herself and later died from her injuries, while Casey surrendered without resistance. Following his capture, Casey was charged with first-degree escape and felony murder under Alabama's felony murder rule, which allows for a murder charge if a death occurs during the commission of a felony. However, in May 2023, he pleaded guilty to the escape charge, and the felony murder charge was dropped as part of a plea agreement. He received a life sentence for the escape, adding to his existing 75-year sentence for previous crimes. The case garnered widespread media attention and has been the subject of documentaries and dramatizations, including the Netflix documentary Jailbreak: Love on the Run. The story shows how easily things can go wrong when the lines between inmates and staff start to blur, and just how much damage that kind of manipulation can cause both in and outside the prison walls. Gonzalo Lopez, Texas prison escape and tragic aftermath. State of crime, Texas, age at time of escape 46. On May 12, 2022, Gonzalo Lopez, a convicted murderer affiliated with the Mexican Mafia, escaped from a Texas Department of Criminal Justice TDCJ transport bus near Centerville, Texas. While being transported for a medical appointment, Lopez managed to free himself from his restraints and used a sharp object to cut through a metal door, separating the inmates from the driver. He then crawled into the driver's compartment, stabbed the driver, and engaged in a struggle with another officer. Lopez briefly took control of the bus, but crashed it a short distance away and fled into the surrounding woods, initiating a massive manhunt. For 3 weeks, Lopez evaded capture, despite an extensive search involving hundreds of law enforcement officers. On June 2, 2022, he broke into a ranch in Centerville, Texas, and murdered 66-year-old Mark Collins and his 4 grandchildren, Waylon, 18, Carson, 16, Hudson, 11, and Bryson, 11. After the killings, Lopez stole firearms and a pickup truck from the property. Later that day, authorities spotted the stolen truck in Atascosa County, approximately 220 miles from the crime scene. After a brief pursuit, officers deployed spike strips to disable the vehicle. Lopez crashed the truck, exited, and opened fire on the officers with an AR-15 rifle. Law enforcement returned fire, killing Lopez at the scene. The escape and subsequent murders prompted the TDCJ to suspend inmate transports and conduct a comprehensive review of its procedures. Investigations revealed multiple security lapses that facilitated Lopez's escape. Darnell Keith Washington, a violent escape and crime spree across California. State of crime: California. Age at time of escape: 23. On August 28, 2012, Darnell Keith Washington escaped from the Glen Helen Rehabilitation Center in San Bernardino County, California, where he was awaiting trial for armed robbery. His wife, Tanya Washington, assisted in the escape by helping him scale a 10-foot fence during a visitation. After the escape, the couple embarked on a month-long crime spree across California. On September 2, during a traffic stop in South El Monte, Darnell shot and wounded Los Angeles County Sheriff's Deputy John Marquez. The couple then carjacked a vehicle and continued their criminal activities, including robberies and additional carjackings. Their spree culminated on October 5th with the murder of 55-year-old retired schoolteacher Susie Coe in Hercules, California. Darnell stabbed Coe 21 times before stealing her car. The couple was apprehended later that day in SeaTac, Washington, after a brief chase. Following their arrest, both Darnell and Tanya Washington faced multiple charges, including murder, attempted murder, robbery, and carjacking. In December 2012, they pleaded not guilty to all charges. While awaiting trial, Darnell attempted another escape, by carving out his cell window and fashioning a rope from bed sheets, but the attempt was unsuccessful. In August 2016, Darnell Washington's trial commenced. Tanya Washington accepted a plea deal, pleading guilty to voluntary manslaughter and receiving a sentence of 23 years and 4 months in prison. She agreed to testify against her husband. The defense argued that Tanya was responsible for Coe's murder, but DNA evidence on the murder weapon linked Darnell to the crime. In September 2016, Darnell was found guilty of first-degree murder, and in November 2016, he was sentenced to death. Darnell Washington's escape and subsequent crime spree uncovered significant security lapses within the correctional system. Frank Freshwater's The Shawshank Fugitive. State of crime, Ohio. Age at time of escape, 23. In 1957, Frank Freshwaters was convicted of voluntary manslaughter after fatally striking Eugene Flint with his car while speeding in Akron, Ohio. Initially sentenced to 1 to 20 years, his term was suspended and he was placed on probation. However, after violating probation, he was incarcerated at the Ohio State Reformatory in Mansfield. Due to good behavior, he was transferred to the Sandusky Honor Farm, a minimum security facility. On September 30, 1959, Freshwaters escaped from the Honor Farm. The specifics of his escape remain undisclosed. Following his escape, Freshwaters adopted the alias William Harold Cox and led a quiet life, working as a truck driver and mobile librarian. He initially moved to Florida, obtaining a Social Security card under his assumed name. Later, he settled in Hurricane, West Virginia. In 1975, he was arrested in Charleston, West Virginia, but then Governor Arch A. Moore Jr. refused to extradite him to Ohio, citing his positive reputation in the community. Freshwaters was released and continued to live under the radar. In 2015, the U.S. Marshals Service reopened his case and tracked him to Melbourne, Florida. On May 4, 2015, authorities approached Freshwaters, who initially denied his identity but soon confessed. He was arrested without incident, marking the end of a 56-year fugitive run, the longest in U.S. Marshals history. Extradited to Ohio, he served time until the Ohio Adult Parole Authority voted for his release in February 2016, citing his nonviolent history during his time on the run. He was released on parole on June 15, 2016. Monroe Hickson, serial killer and fugitive. State of crime, South Carolina. Age at time of escape, 57. Monroe Hickson, born on July 8, 1908, in Aiken County, South Carolina, was a convicted serial killer responsible for 4 murders and an attempted murder in 1946. His crimes included the axe murder of David Garrett, the fatal shooting of Mary Bennett and the wounding of her husband Edward, the bludgeoning death of Annie Weisberg, and an assault on a female liquor store clerk who survived. Initially, these crimes went unsolved, and another man, L.D. Harris, was wrongfully convicted and sentenced to death for 2 of the murders. Hickson's involvement came to light in 1957 when he was arrested for assault and subsequently confessed to the earlier murders. He was convicted and sentenced to 4 consecutive life terms. While serving his sentence at Manning Correctional Institution in Columbia, South Carolina, Hickson escaped custody on March 10, 1966. He managed to walk away from the prison's outside yard without the guards noticing. After his escape, a federal warrant was issued, and he was added to the FBI's 10 Most Wanted Fugitives list on February 17, 1967. Hickson remained at large until December 29, 1967, when he died in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. Living under the alias Willie Tyler, he had been working as a migrant farm worker. His identity was confirmed through fingerprint analysis after a couple recognized him and reported their suspicions to authorities. Monroe Hickson's case is notable for the wrongful conviction of L.D. Harris, who was exonerated after Hickson's confession. James Earl Ray, assassin of Martin Luther King Jr., state of crime, Tennessee. Age at time of escape, 50. James Earl Ray was convicted for the assassination of civil rights leader Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. on April 4, 1968 in Memphis, Tennessee. King was fatally shot on the balcony of the Lorraine Motel, and Ray was arrested 2 months later at London Heathrow Airport while traveling under a false identity. Ray pleaded guilty in 1969 and was sentenced to 99 years in prison to avoid the death penalty. He later recanted his confession, claiming he was part of a larger conspiracy. On June 10, 1977, while incarcerated at Brushy Mountain State Penitentiary in Tennessee, James Earl Ray escaped with 6 other inmates. They sawed through bars and used a makeshift ladder to climb over the prison wall. Ray was on the run for 55 hours before being captured in rugged terrain near the prison by a massive manhunt that included helicopters and bloodhounds. Ray's escape led to an additional year being added to his sentence, bringing his total to 100 years. Over the years, he filed multiple unsuccessful appeals seeking a retrial, maintaining he was framed. James Earl Ray died in prison on April 23, 1998, at the age of 70 from complications related to liver failure and hepatitis C. Ray's escape and controversial conviction remain part of American history's darker chapters. Many still debate whether he acted alone or was part of a broader conspiracy. The King family, in fact, supported a retrial, suggesting Ray may not have been the real assassin. Ted Bundy, the infamous serial killer who escaped twice. State of crime: Colorado. First escape: Florida. Final arrest. Age at time of escape: 30, first escape; 31, second escape. Ted Bundy, one of the most infamous serial killers in American history, was responsible for the deaths of at least 30 young women during the 1970s, although the actual number of victims may be much higher. Arrested in 1975 and facing murder charges in Colorado, Bundy became notorious not only for his brutal crimes, but also for his audacious prison escapes. With a background in law and a manipulative charm, he was able to exploit weaknesses in the justice system to evade capture twice in a single year. His first escape occurred on June 7, 1977, at the Pitkin County Courthouse in Aspen, Colorado. While granted unsupervised access to the law library to prepare for his trial, Bundy jumped from a second-story window and disappeared into the wilderness. Despite the rugged terrain and ongoing search efforts, he remained on the run for 6 days before being recaptured while driving a stolen vehicle. This escape shocked authorities and highlighted serious lapses in security. Later that year, on December 30, 1977, Bundy escaped again, and this time from the Garfield County Jail. He had lost significant weight and used a hacksaw to widen a ceiling panel in his cell. Bundy crawled through the ductwork, dropped into the jailer's apartment, and walked out unnoticed. He made his way across several states, eventually arriving in Florida, where he resumed his killing spree. Within weeks, he brutally murdered multiple women, including 2 students at Florida State University's Chi Omega sorority and 12-year-old Kimberly Leach. Bundy was finally apprehended in Pensacola, Florida, in February 1978. He was convicted of multiple murders and sentenced to death. After nearly a decade of appeals and interviews during which he confessed to additional crimes, Ted Bundy was executed in the electric chair on January 24, 1989, at Florida State Prison. His story remains one of the most chilling examples of criminal cunning and systemic failure in U.S. criminal justice history. Edward Dean Kennedy. State of crime: Florida. Age at time of escape: 33. Edward Dean Kennedy, a convicted murderer, shocked the state of Florida when he escaped from prison in 1981. Kennedy had already been sentenced to life for a 1978 double murder involving the fatal shooting of 2 men. While incarcerated at the Union Correctional Institution in Rayford, Florida, he managed to escape with another inmate by cutting through a perimeter fence. a breach that exposed serious flaws in prison security measures at the time. Once on the run, Kennedy's behavior turned increasingly violent. Just days after the escape, he abducted and murdered a man named Floyd Cohn, using the victim's car to continue his flight from law enforcement. The killing added a new murder charge to Kennedy's record and prompted a multi-state manhunt that stretched across the southeastern United States. The FBI and local agencies warned the public that Kennedy was extremely dangerous and possibly armed. Kennedy was eventually apprehended after a tense standoff in Texas. The violent nature of his escape and the subsequent murder drew national attention and served as a catalyst for tightening security protocols in Florida's correctional facilities. His actions led to his resentencing, and this time with the death penalty on the table due to the killing committed during his escape from custody. Edward Dean Kennedy was executed in Florida's electric chair on July 21, 1992. His case remains one of the most lethal prison escape incidents in U.S. history, highlighting how lapses in prison infrastructure can lead to further tragedy when violent offenders regain freedom. His name is now etched among those whose escapes reshaped how prisons approach high-risk inmates. Briley Brothers, State of Crime, Virginia. Age at time of escape, 28 and 30. The Briley brothers, Linwood and James Briley, were part of a notorious crime spree in Richmond, Virginia, during the late 1970s that left at least 11 people dead. The two brothers, along with their younger sibling Anthony and an accomplice, committed a series of brutal and sadistic murders, often targeting victims at random. Linwood and James were eventually convicted of multiple counts of capital murder and sentenced to death in 1980. They were housed at Virginia's death row facility in Mecklenburg Correctional Center, a maximum security prison. Despite the high security setting, Linwood, 30, and James, 28, managed to escape death row on May 31, 1984. With the help of 5 other inmates, they meticulously planned their breakout, exploiting lax oversight and smuggling tools over time. The escapees took advantage of a prison work detail to overpower guards, using fabricated weapons and disguises. They successfully broke out of the facility by scaling a prison fence in a laundry truck, triggering a nationwide manhunt. Following their escape, the Briley brothers made their way north to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, where they sought refuge with family members. For nearly 3 weeks, the two managed to avoid detection, hiding out and blending in, while law enforcement scoured the East Coast. However, a tip from someone familiar with their case eventually led to their capture on June 19, 1984, ending one of the most dangerous prison breaks in U.S. history. Linwood Briley was executed by electric chair on October 12, 1984, and James Briley followed on April 18, 1985. Their escape remains one of the most infamous in Virginia's correctional history, due to their violent background and the deadly potential they posed while on the run. The case prompted a complete overhaul of security measures at Mecklenburg Correctional Center and led to greater scrutiny of death row protocols across the country. Martin Garula, the first death row escapee in Texas in over 60 years. State of Crime, Texas. Age at time of escape, 29. Martin Garula was a convicted murderer on Texas death row when he made headlines in 1998 by becoming the first inmate in over 6 decades to escape from death row in the state. Garula had been sentenced to death in 1993 for the 1992 murder of a Corpus Christi man during a robbery. At the time of his escape from the Ellis unit near Huntsville, Texas, Garula was 29 years old. His daring prison break exposed major lapses in security within a supposedly impenetrable part of the Texas prison system. On the night of November 27, 1998, Garula and 6 other death row inmates cut through a recreation yard fence and scaled 2 prison walls. While the others were quickly caught or retreated back into the prison, Garula successfully escaped. He vanished into the surrounding wooded area, sparking a massive manhunt that involved helicopters, dogs, and hundreds of law enforcement officers. His flight from justice lasted several days, capturing national attention and raising fears over the vulnerability of even the most secure prison units. Despite the extensive search, Gurule managed to avoid immediate capture. However, on December 3, 1998, authorities discovered his body in the Trinity River near the prison. An autopsy revealed that Gurule had drowned while attempting to cross the river shortly after his escape. His brief time on the run ended tragically, but the implications of his breakout led to sweeping changes in how death row inmates were secured and supervised in Texas. Martin Gurule's escape remains a pivotal moment in the history of Texas corrections. Not only did it reveal the ingenuity of desperate inmates, but it also exposed critical flaws in death row containment that had gone unnoticed for years. The incident prompted a complete security overhaul at the Ellis unit and served as a cautionary tale for correctional institutions across the U.S. Leslie Dale Martin, State of Crime, Louisiana. Age at time of escape, 34. Leslie Dale Martin was convicted of the brutal 1991 assault and murder of 19-year-old Christina Bergen in Calcasieu Parish, Louisiana. After meeting her at a bar, Martin offered to give her a ride home, but instead drove to a remote area where he assaulted, strangled, and ultimately killed her. He then attempted to cover up the crime by burning her body and disposing of the remains in a wooded area. His actions were especially heinous, and the evidence against him, along with his confession, resulted in a conviction for first-degree murder. In July 2001, while on death row at the Louisiana State Penitentiary, which is also known as Angola Prison, Martin and 3 other death row inmates plotted an escape. They meticulously sawed through the bars of their cell doors and used dummy heads to make it appear they were sleeping. However, before they could fully execute their plan, prison staff discovered the attempted escape and quickly intervened. The escape was foiled before the inmates could leave the prison grounds. Following the failed escape, security measures at Angola were significantly increased. Martin's already grim legal outlook worsened due to the incident. He was executed by lethal injection on May 10, 2002, at the age of 35. His case remains one of Louisiana's more chilling examples of both violent crime and the extreme lengths some inmates will go to in order to avoid justice. Sarah Jo Pender, State of Crime, Indiana. Age at time of escape, 29. Sarah Jo Pender, convicted of orchestrating the 2000 double murder of her 2 roommates, managed to escape from the Rockville Correctional Facility in Indiana on August 4, 2008. With the help of prison guard Scott Spittler and a former inmate named Jamie Long, Pender slipped past security. Spittler smuggled in civilian clothes, and Long, who was on work release, helped transport Pender out of the facility in a prison van. The escape was carefully coordinated, exposing serious lapses in prison oversight and staff integrity. Pender remained a fugitive for 136 days. During that time, she relocated to Chicago, changed her appearance, and began a new life under a false identity. She worked as a nanny and attempted to keep a low profile. However, her case gained widespread media attention after being featured on America's Most Wanted. A viewer tip led U.S. Marshals to her hideout, and she was arrested without incident on December 22, 2008. Following her capture, Pender was returned to Indiana and placed under maximum security conditions. Guard Scott Spittler was sentenced to 8 years in prison for his role in the escape, and accomplice Jamie Long also faced charges. Pender's already lengthy 110-year sentence was extended due to the escape, and she was transferred to a more secure facility to prevent further incidents. Despite being labeled a female Charles Manson by prosecutors, Sarah Jo Pender maintained a calm and charismatic public image, even attracting public sympathy. Her case continues to be one of the most notorious female prison escapes in U.S. history. From cunning plots to daring breakouts, these escapes remind us that even the most secure prisons can't always contain the determination of those inside. But justice has a long memory, and eventually the law catches up. These fugitives may have slipped through the cracks for a time, but none could outrun their fate. Thanks for joining us on this gripping journey through America's most shocking prison escapes. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more true crime stories that uncover the darkest corners of justice.